The image should have been simple. A royal family in quiet formation, saying goodbye to a much-loved matriarch. Instead, one moment rewrote the day. As the Duchess of Kent's coffin was carried away, and the congregation settled into the gravity of farewell, cameras caught Prince Andrew sharing a light exchange with Sarah Ferguson, the infamous smile that triggered gasps outside and headlines afterward. For most of the senior royals, the tone never wavered, composed, spare, appropriately mournful. But the clip landed like a pebble in a still lake, and the ripples moved straight toward the Prince of Wales. According to those close to him, William was furious, not only at the timing, not only at the optics, but at the feeling of being ambushed into proximity with an uncle he has worked for years to keep at arm's length. In the days since, a second storyline reignited, the suggestion, cited by royal biographer Andrew Loney, that William's mistrust predates the Epstein disaster and hardened after rude remarks Andrew allegedly made about Kate. No direct quote is offered, the allegation sits there, heavy and unsourced in detail, but potent enough to explain why William reacts the way he does. For the heir, this is not an abstract reputational calculus, it's personal. He sees a pattern, behavior that undercuts the dignity of the institution and the work of those still shouldering it, including his wife. What made the funeral moment so combustible was context. Andrew's public life effectively ended in January 2022, when he surrendered military titles and patronages, and stepped back from official duties amid the fallout of his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Since then, every appearance is a high-wire act. One misread gesture becomes a referendum. The police-escorted arrival from Royal Lodge with Sarah Ferguson reminded everyone, supporters and critics alike, that the Duke of York still moves with security and symbolism, even after the drawbridge was pulled up. Then came the smile, the chuckle, the look of ease where solemnity was the only acceptable language. At a garden party it would have passed, at a requiem it detonated. Close watchers noticed William's jaw set as the camera lingered. He was there to represent continuity, instead, the narrative swerved to damage control. Friends quoted by Loney say the heir believes his father has not been firm enough, that the cost of lenience is paid by everyone else, in trust, in headlines, in the steady erosion of the royal brand. The same sources describe a years-long effort by William to avoid being photographed with his uncle, an invisible line he tries to keep between the working front line and the unresolved past. An unplanned frame at a funeral collapsed that distance, and that, more than anything, explains the furious mood. Layered onto this is the Royal Lodge saga, the 30-room house on the Windsor estate where Andrew and Sarah reside. The biography alleges William wants them out, seeing the property as a symbol of a chapter that should have closed and a tangible test of standards, upkeep, optics, fairness. Reports suggest he views the house as ill-maintained and ill-matched to the new era's expectations, a visible reminder that the rules bend where they should not. The language, as quoted by Loney's source, is ice-cold. If Charles doesn't act, William will when the crown is his. Whether that prophecy is bluster or blueprint, it speaks to a deeper calculation. Titles and patronages can be stripped on paper. The harder work is stripping away the perception that exceptions remain. The question of rude remarks about Kate, left vague in the biography, matters less for its content than for its effect. In the royal household, you can disagree on tactics. You do not take swipes at the future queen. Kate is the monarchy's quiet center of gravity, the standard for restraint and the public's most stable point of identification. In remission and pacing her return to duty, she has become a symbol of steadiness at a time when every misstep becomes a meme. To suggest that Andrew mocked or belittled her, even privately, adds a charge to every frame where William and Andrew share air. It explains the steel. It explains the distance. It explains why a smile at the wrong second draws a reaction measured not only in PR risk, but in loyalty. Inside the cathedral, most of the family did what the moment demanded. King Charles held the line of composure, the Princess of Wales kept her movements minimal, her gaze lowered, the choreography of respect. The Duchess of Edinburgh's small blown kiss toward the departing coffin became the day's purest human note, a gesture so gentle it needed no commentary. Against that backdrop, Andrew's levity played as discordant even to sympathetic eyes. Intent is unknowable, optics are not. And monarchy, more than any modern institution, lives and dies by optics. None of this is new. The 2019 Newsnight interview remains the hinge on which Andrew's public life turned. In the aftermath, William reportedly pushed for a decisive break, not out of cruelty, but to draw a bright line between those who still carry the sovereign's work and those whose presence makes that work harder. The decision in 2022 to remove roles and duties was the formal expression of that line. What has followed is the informal work of maintaining it: seating plans, arrival routes, back-of-house choreography designed to minimize accidental frames. When that choreography fails, when a surprise entrance or an unfortunate camera angle pulls the two men into a single shot, the narrative writes itself, and the heir's patience wears thin. The Royal Lodge dispute sits at the intersection of principle and optics. On principle, can a non-working royal under a cloud continue to occupy a showcase property on Crown land? On optics, what does it say about standards if the property's condition becomes a metaphor for unresolved mess? The answer William seems to favor is clarity, a tidier map of who lives where and why. Palace real estate is not just housing, it's a public language. Every address communicates standing, trust, and proximity to the center. In that language, Royal Lodge now speaks too loudly. What happens next depends on two things the monarchy still controls: time and discipline. Time, because the public's anger is hottest in the first 48 hours, discipline, because silence and consistent behavior cool what explanations rarely do. The Duchess of Kent's funeral deserves to be remembered for her life, not for a contour of a smile that lasted half a second. Yet the episode will linger, because it touches the themes that define this reign's early years: the struggle to wall off the present from the past, the tension between familial loyalty and institutional survival, the demand that those who remain in public life show the restraint the role requires. For William, the right answer is likely the hardest one: keep the line, keep the distance, and refuse the bait of open confrontation. He doesn't need a speech. He needs 1,000 frames of unimpeachable steadiness. For Andrew, the path narrows further: appearances only when necessary, conduct beyond reproach, an understanding that a single misread expression undoes months of careful quiet. For Charles, the choice is between the long habit of accommodation and the short, sharp clarity his son prefers. The crown can afford compassion, it cannot afford confusion. And Kate? She remains the unspoken center of this entire story. When biographers float the idea of rude remarks, they are really describing a red line everyone in the institution understands: diminish the future queen, and you diminish the brand you claim to defend. That is why the allegation, even without a quote, carries weight. It explains the heir's posture not as pique, but as protection, of his wife, of the role she inhabits, and of the credibility the crown needs to function. In the end, the image Britain prefers to export is simple: a family that can carry grief without spectacle. The Duchess of Kent's farewell mostly gave the country that picture. The rest, the smile, the fury, the biography's barbs, is the noise modern monarchy must outlast. But noise has a cost, and William has decided he will not keep paying it. The line is drawn. If the past insists on stepping into the frame, the heir will step out of it, and make sure the audience knows why. When the history of this reign is written, the footnotes will mention the viral clips. The chapters will measure something else: how well the front line defended the center, and whether the institution learned the discipline of clean frames. After a funeral that should have been uncomplicated, that lesson feels newly urgent. The public can forgive misfortune, it is tired of carelessness. And in that gap, between fatigue and expectation, the future king is already governing.